So, hearing from God and the sermon, Hearing from God. I just want to speak to you a little bit about some of the things that stuck out to me in the Hearing God speech from Bob Ham. One of the things that really hit me when Bob was speaking was the fact that the Lord is not limited in the ways that he can speak to us, meaning that the Lord can speak through many different variables. He speaks to us through dreams, through visions. He speaks to us through other believers, and he'll speak to us audibly and through that still small voice on the inside. So I want to go ahead and tell you one of the ways in which God spoke to me, and the way that God spoke to me in different areas of my life in order to lead me into what God had prepared for me and the call that God had for my life. 2 years ago, when I started coming to the church at Christian Life Church, where I'm attending now, God spoke a word to me, and he spoke to me in my truck one day, and it was such a powerful word and such a confirmation to me that it solidified what God had already prepared for me and the call that God had for my life, and it enabled me to move into it with confidence. So I want to kind of start at the beginning and kind of take you guys through that process of the ways in which God spoke to me that helped me to have faith to move forward with my walk with God. I discovered my call from God when I started at the church I attend now about 4 or 5 years ago. God began to speak to me about his call upon my life and his call to ministry, and it was through his spirit, it was through his presence. A lot of the times I'd be in my truck worshiping, or I'd be at church worshiping, and I could feel the presence of God coming down on me in such a heavy way that I would cry and I would weep, and I would feel good, and I would be up and I would be down, and I didn't know quite what was happening, but the Lord was speaking to me through his presence and through his spirit, and he was confirming that I was born again and that he had a new life for me, and he was beginning to let me know that he was close and he was near. He spoke to me through other believers. I went on a spiritual retreat to Tres Dias, and when I went out there was a bunch of guys that I had never met before, that I didn't know. And one of the guys, one night we were sitting out for dinner, he looked at me, and out of nowhere he says, "You're like a natural born leader." I'm thinking, what? I don't understand why he would say that. I didn't know him well, but it was something just came out of his mouth. He said, "Yeah, you could see it. When you speak, we listen, and you speak with authority, and you speak with a passion for God. So it draws people in, and we want to hear what you have to say, and we're willing to listen. So you're a natural born leader." And it was a big confirmation for me from God had already been doing for me in the church, that he had called me to a position of leadership in the church. From a guy I didn't know at all, it was a huge confirmation from God. So through another believer is how he confirmed that for me in the beginning. Another thing he did was through his favor, God spoke to me, and God spoke to me, and he let me know through opening different doors through my walk with God that he had already placed these and already had these ready for me from the beginning. And it wasn't anything that I really fought for or pushed for. It was simply just stepping in to the next door that God opened, and I stepped in, and God opened another door, and I stepped into there. But it was listening to God and being attentive to God and trying to hear God in order to find my way and his will for my life. God revealed a word to me one day in my truck. It was a specific word. It was the word that really helped me to step into God's call for my life. And I was in my truck, and I was worshiping, and I was kind of in his presence, and I was just seeking God, and God spoke to me, not audibly, but in the still small voice inside. God said, "Matt, step into what I've prepared for you." It was so powerful when he spoke it to me that I immediately pulled out my notebook and I wrote it down. I wrote in big words, "Step into what I've prepared for you." So as I wrote that down, I kind of forgot about it. I stuck it off to the side. But several days later, I was in church, and the pastor called me into his office. He said, "I need you to sit down, man. I need to speak with you." And as I sat down, he looked at me and he said, "Matt, I kind of see you here in church, and I kind of see your interest in serving here in the ministries, and you begin serving in the church, and I feel like God has a call upon your life, and I feel like God's calling you into ministry." And at that very moment, God reminded me when he spoke to me in the truck, and he said, "Matt, step into what I prepared for you." And I didn't say anything at the time, but he began to speak, and he began to tell me that he was looking for somebody to take on the whole ball of wax that he had created for the past 20 years. He had started a church from ground zero, and he was looking for somebody that God would send him in order to hand this thing over. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you that person?" I was totally blown away. I could not believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe that God would have this for me, but it lined up exactly with what God had for me. It was confirmed that God said, "Step into what I prepared for you," and then He had Pastor speak to me. So there was no doubt that it was confirmed that this is the way that God wanted me to go. Through that confirmation, that was what concreted it. That is what told me, you know what, you can move forward. Once I heard that audible, that voice of God, and He spoke to me and He said, "Matt, step into what I prepared for you," along with the confirmations that I've heard from other believers, and along with the confirmation of hearing His voice lined up with all that He had prepared for me and the doors that were opened, I came to a place where I had faith and confirmation, and it really sealed the deal to step into what God has prepared for me. Matthew 4:4 says that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And God's constantly speaking. The question is, are we listening? Hearing God is all we'll ever need. So I encourage you today to look to God and get that next word for what He's trying to do for this new season in your life.